Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, co-founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
I'm Nico Casavecchia. I'm a filmmaker based in LA, but I'm originally from Argentina. I'll tell you all about it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Nico, for joining us. And Nico has a really exciting background. He's done some really exciting things doing commercials and short films and stuff out in Hollywood. I believe worked with Meta in the past and Mark Zuckerberg in a commercial. Saw that. That was pretty interesting. And obviously AI is coming and changing a lot of things for jobs, and Hollywood and the entertainment industry is no different. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you and getting your unique perspective, especially someone with such a rich and storied background as yourself.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be here, and I love the podcast. So thank you for having me. It's really an honor.
Yeah, my pleasure. And so for the first couple of minutes, why don't you just take us down your journey, how you got to where you are, where you're kind of working on now, and those sorts of things, and we'll kind of see where we go.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my career has been a little bit of an orthodox career. I think it started this weird wandering path started or was set off this way because I'm a self-taught filmmaker. I studied graphic design, but dropped out of college because I basically moved from Argentina, where I'm from, to Spain, and that led to 11 years of living in Barcelona, which were great years in terms of like a formative experience and getting to know the craft. And at the same time, where the challenge that came up was like, all right, what are we going to do with the skills that I had out of high school? And immediately was evident for me that filmmaking was a way to make a living and express myself and create stuff with other people. So I started with friends, we created a little studio, and then eventually that led to me becoming a professional director in commercials. And around 2012, I was already, directing for bigger brands in Spain, and I felt that I needed a bigger playground. And in Spain, the glass ceiling. I think this is an interesting thing about Europe, is that the quality of life is very high, but if you're ambitious, you have expectations, and especially if you were not born there in Spain, there's not that much you could do at the time. I felt personally I'd limited my career. That in my first experience working in the US, that changed. So in 2012, I did this job in New York, and immediately expanded my horizons to the possibilities that I could do with my career. And I decided to stay. So I lived in New York for 5 years and eventually moved here to LA, which is the natural migration route of filmmakers. And all throughout these years, I've been led by curiosity, just because a self-taught filmmaker is always asking themselves what to do next and what tools to incorporate and what is the path that will lead you to express yourself in a more interesting way, open new doors, meet new people. And so that's been kind of the North Star of my career, and kind of a geek. So somehow my life has taken me to combining technology with culture. And I think I work in the intersection of culture and technology. This is true for the first thing I've done, which is the first ever short film I did it with a webcam. And I think that kind of like set the tone for the rest of my career in a way. I eventually did experiments with all sort of different things and technologies, including crazy Guinness World Record film for IBM, where I collaborated with scientists working on the smallest stop motion film ever done, which is actually by moving individual atoms on a surface of copper. I did that. I did a VR film in around 2018. We premiered in Sundance in collaboration with Rosario Dawson, the actress, and a co-creator and an amazing team. We did this VR animated film in real time, and that was my introduction to real-time engines, and eventually, work in branded content for companies like Meta, IBM, Google, Snapchat, Pinterest, you name it. I work with everyone. I work with everyone in California. And so I think I got a good understanding of how those companies work, and viewed myself on the culture of Silicon Valley quite a bit, but always from the perspective of a person who's trying to tell stories and communicate their ideas to a broader audience, kind of a bridge between those technologies and the stories they tell to people, and how can helping them communicate and trying to bridge the gap between the consumers and other companies and them. So that's kind of where I'm operate as a filmmaker. I have two careers. I have a career in film and a career in branded commercial work. And of course, I have a perspective on both and try to keep both alive in times that are very, very complicated. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell, I would say.
That's awesome. Thank you for the thorough explanation and the background. It gives a lot of greens to your work and your life experience. I think says a lot from South America to Europe to New York to LA. That's quite a journey, and to be bold enough to do that, I think I see a lot of myself in you as well because I was going to be an engineer in college, and then Y2K came about. I'm in my mid 40s, and so Y2K came about, and like computers were going to die, computers are going to crash, and so I got a job updating computers for Y2K, and then that's how I got my foot in technology, and like I've never really looked back since then. I looked into a job at NASA, so it's really funny how you kind of set on a path and you just end up you don't know where you're going to end up, and I think it's going to get that's going to get more and more accelerated, I think, for folks because of these generative AI tools and AIs as well. Like your imagination is going to be the only limit, I think, in the future, and your will and determination is what's going to see you through to some things.
100%. I think the big question of the future is like, how can we bring value to an equation that is dominated or so disrupted by these new technologies? And I don't have the question. I keep thinking about it. I think thinking about these things is as important as working with the tools and as important as actually trying to be critical about them. I think we need to think deep into what are that is the future and how we engage with it, partially because I think we need to create an etiquette, a way to work around these tools, a way to use them, new ethical boundaries, new ethical rules, new ways of taking advantage of them as well, how to maximize our time, how to maximize our abilities, and how to avoid, I think, replacement. Labor replacement is something that scares me a little bit, like every other filmmaker. So it's really interesting that people like you are open to have these conversations with artists, because I think every artist right now is at the edge of their seat thinking, okay, what is going to happen? How is this going to impact my career that is already so difficult?
Yeah, and I think you can kind of look back to the history and get inspiration from others. And so, as you were going through your story, I'm a big fan of Joseph Kosinski, the director of Tron and Oblivion and F1 movie and Top Gun Maverick. He was an
Top Gun.
architect. Top Gun Maverick. He was an architect, and he taught architecture at Columbia University. And then somehow he lucked in. He met David Fincher, I think, when he moved out. He started with digital because the technology was there. He was like, "Oh, I have these digital cameras. I can create content with it." Much like you, he got started with commercials, and then he pivoted from this career where he loved architecture and then into this career where he's making movies. He created the Gears of War commercial, the very famous Gears of Mad World commercial, because Fincher was too busy shooting something else, and like here he is all these years later as this one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood. And I think I tell people all the time, like technology is a great equalizers. You have to learn how to pivot, right? Pivot as much as Dr. J back in the day in the NBA is what I like to say. And so it's funny that you see those parallels regardless of what industry it is. Like you have the ability to do that, and hopefully you can have the talking to folks like you will give people the inspiration to do that as well.
Yeah, I think that, pivoting is and learning new skills have always been imbued. And if you think about the career of cinema, it's a story of disruption. It's a story of constant reinvention, starting from the very beginnings, when you have to deal with the question is like, okay, distribution, what is the technology, what is the distribution, and what is the art part, right? If you think about the Lumiere brothers in France at the turn of the century, they have this new invention. There's a lot of different labs working on it. It's crazy how the parallels apply here. There's all these labs working on this idea of moving images, right? We have, before that, you have the zoetrope. You have an understanding that if you move pictures fast enough and if they're correlated to each other, the human eye will not see the difference. We'll start seeing motion basically out of the inability to see this individual frames as individual frames. So everybody had an understanding of how they work. They had like an emulsion company, so they started putting out these films. They create the camera, they create the ability to do film. They're one of the strongest contenders. And when you think about the stool of cinema at that time, you have three legs. I think you have the technology, right? It's like, how is the camera work? How is going to actually the technology in this case? How are the equivalent of the LLMs right now or diffusion models, right? You also have the artistic side. It's like, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to show? So the answer for the Lumiere brothers is like, we're going to do two things. We're going to send people off to shoot little documentaries around the world, and we're going to bring them back home and show people how the world looks in motion. We're going to also shoot vaudeville situations. There are little snippets of comedy skids that we've seen on theaters, right? And we're going to play that. And finally, the distribution is the third leg of the stool. And if you think about the patents in the US, which is very fitting and interesting, they're more about individual experience of cinema. So there were like booths, you put a coin, you look in, and then you have this experience of moving image. And the Lumiere are trying to create the theater experience, which is more, is closer to a theatrical distribution where you sit down and you see a show like you would on a vaudeville on a popular theater. So all those questions were happening at the same time. That's a time of huge disruption. If you fast forward to the late 20s, you have the shift from silent cinema to sound cinema, right? The cinema with sound, which happens in about 5 years. And when we think about cinema at that time, it looks completely different than the experience that we have today. Like cinemas were a place where people would gather together. There was a band, right? Because the music was not part of the movie. So they had this music sheets and they have to interpret that. The band will play some music before the show. Kids would be very loud because like parents sometimes they didn't know how to read. So they would read the subtitles, like those little cards to their parents. It was kind of like a family situation where it was very lively and very much, it was closer to kind of like a popular vaudeville show. Then sound comes along, and 5 years later, all bands are out of work and they're relocating to something else. Like people are sitting down in silence watching this movie. So many times, the actors who play the silent roles and were great for that kind of technology were displaced by actors who could speak. And then the beautiful language of cinema, which was created for this kind of cameras, is lost because now the microphones fix the whole experience in one place. So now the actors cannot move. So that changes the language of cinema, and the cinema will not be great again until like a decade later when the cameras get smaller. So my point being, like, cinema, just to take one technology being touched by AI, has always been changing. These changes have been traumatical to some people and been opportunities to others. One thing I don't like is the idea that, okay, everybody gets to pivot and everybody gets to do something else or they get a new job. Like sometimes people get the disruption, like this one happened so quickly that some could not adapt and some created huge fortunes and some pivoted, right? I believe that today, especially the VFX industry, which is the most affected from my point of view on the diffusion models and the new frontier models like VO3, those folks who are doing VFX are so sophisticated technically and so flexible creatively that I think that they're going to adapt. Like I think most of them going to adapt, and this is going to create an abundance of opportunities for a lot of people. So I'm not terribly worried. I think that jobs in the VFX industry are changing all the time, and this is another way of that change. But I do think, and I don't know who will be affected by this, but I know that some folks will be left behind, and I think it's important to try to communicate this with, like, I think being serious about this and consequential, and say, all right, this is not nothing. It's not just good news. This is a fundamental shift in the way we produce things. I think it's an inevitable change. I think it's a technology that is here and that's not going to change, right? The toothpaste is not going to go back to the tube. So given that the fact that the technology is here, how can we prepare for it? I think we do have a window. We can talk about that. And I think that creative people should engage with it and try to understanding and take a position, like just make a plan of what is going to be your position. Because I think there's several different positions you can take on the landscape of creating audiovisual content, all the way from rejecting it to embracing it completely. So there's a range and a spectrum. And I think there's opportunities actually in all those different options, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and thank you for the historical perspective as well, because we do that quite a lot with the other industries that we speak about, construction engineering and things like. There's always this disruptor, and it's evolve or die is never really changed. I think, like you said, the big thing from this perspective is how quickly is that going to happen? How quickly are people going to need to pivot? And I was actually listening to this. I was driving back from a weekend trip over the weekend. And I was listening to the Smartlist podcast with Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes and Will Arnett, and they interviewed James Gunn, the new head of DC Studios and Guardians of the Galaxy fame and stuff. And he was talking about basically the VFX. He's worried about VFX the most. And as well, he was worried about that as well. And Jason Bateman brought a good point. He's like, well, we're hoping that if these studios can, but again, it's a capitalistic society, so who knows if this is altruistic or not, but like they'll free up more benefits and time and stuff that they'll be able to develop more products because things will be done quicker. That's the hope, at least, because that's kind of the hope everywhere else, right? The time and money saved in one area is going to introduce places to spend money and innovate in other areas. That's the goal. And how that actually happens in Hollywood, I think we could all be skeptical of the big business aspect of it. But the cool thing too is that I think you're going to see a lot of smaller studios, A24 lights, kind of to pop up with people who are visionaries who are able to, again, like what we say, punch above their weight class from that perspective.
100%. I think that there's a few trends going on in the film industry. One is that we're fucked. Well, there's different reasons, right? There's obviously the pressure from the streaming wars, right? So you had a
Mm-hmm.
very disrupting model, I would say, from I would say from 2008 all the way to now, right? For the last 10 to 15 years, this idea of streaming services coming in with low, basically connected to the fact that the interest rates were very low. So tech companies had all this capital to invest, right? They go into streaming, right? They invest a lot of money. Almost you can think about it as dumping, right? Like the same is the same you see same trends that you see in companies like Uber that don't need necessarily to be profitable because it's a financialized model where the shareholders are seeing growth and those trends, if their trends go up, that's enough. So for a long time, shareholders saw growth in the streaming companies and they kept pumping money into them. The companies created a bubble of content, right? So around 2019, we had about 600 shows, and we have now, I think, 250. These numbers, I'm making them up, but they're around that. I don't think I'm too off, right? So for about 10 years, the Hollywood and content bubble was so big that attracted all these newcomers, right? And then when the interest rates started going up, then basically the money dried up and reality hit them. And then those companies needed to be profitable. We all know the story. We see a lot of consolidation. We see a reduction on content that, and a view that risk is, we went from, I would say, a very risk prone industry where everybody had a shot, not everybody at all, but like, a lot of newcomers had a shot at creating a show, at creating a movie, at doing something daring. We went from that to a very dry environment, which is very risk adverse. And you're seeing reshuffling of IP, recycling of franchises all over, right? And people hate it, but the truth is they go to see it. Like the risk is that like the numbers are there. When they put out a new superhero movie, they have bigger chances to make their money back than to create a new thing that could completely flop. People love new things when they like it, but when they don't like it, they just go, they're really not supportive about them. So the studios know this and they became very, very risk adverse. So now the hope is kind of new technology like this one lower the cost of production and put out more things, and we could go back to something closer to where we were in 2008. I would say the golden era, right? Like let's say that was 2015, 2016, where there was a lot of products being made because it wasn't that expensive to make them, and more people were employed in those industries. I think this up to see, or maybe we keep in this era of austerity and people and the money just goes to the top with the cuts that they make out of this thing. What I'm mostly worried about with AI, it's the problem of distribution. And I don't think this distribution expansion will hit in the next 2 years. I think AI is in a very nascent state in terms of diffusion models and pipelines. And we can talk about why that is. But I think when the time comes that this is ubiquitous and it really works very well, and there are professional tools that are established, and now you have an explosion of content, then the problem is distribution. Like, how are we going to get our product, how are we going to get our movies into people's homes, into theaters, into, right? Like the gatekeepers will suddenly have a lot of power, even more than they do now. And I would call those gatekeepers the algorithm of YouTube, the algorithms of Meta, the algorithms of Netflix, right? To a certain extent, a filmmaker that makes it to the Netflix catalog already won. But then the filmmakers who are putting out content on TikTok, on YouTube, on social media, and trying to get audiences are always restrained by the arbitrage of the algorithms. We all know how hard it is to get an audience. So the problem of saturation, the fact that there's so many people creating content right now, and that makes it into a very competitive environment. I think that's going to be the challenge of the next generation, even more than production. I think we've seen how the means of production have become easier for filmmakers. I am a child of that exponential technology, and that I got access to film cameras that were digital and cheaper. I got access to compute that was cheaper, and my laptop could edit back in 15 years ago. My laptop already could edit professional footage, and that gave me an edge as a filmmaker that other people never had in previous generations. And that got only easier, right?
Mhm.
Even distribution for a minute was like a bonanza. If you would create anything, you would put it in YouTube, you had a chance to get an audience. So the distribution channel was free. And that's sometimes people forget how this was years ago. It was not like that, right? But I think the big challenge right now will be, okay, in a scenario where you have a huge saturation of content, who gets to see what and what gets lost? That's the big challenge, I think.
No, I think you brought up a lot of great points there. And the parallels I just see across industry, right? The music industry's had to pivot because of the streaming wars. You could create an album as a pop culture icon and get rich off of just album sales. That doesn't really happen anymore, right? Because nobody buys albums. I guess vinyl's still a thing. I love vinyl. I still buy vinyl, but that's not going to. You're not selling tens of millions of vinyls for any album. And so what they do, they tour. I took my niece over the weekend to a concert here in Central Texas, and $40 t-shirts, $80 tickets, and they played 3 nights in a row in the same venue. Like that's how artists are making their money there. And I think much like so they've pivoted in that industry much like they're pivoting in the entertainment industry as a whole. The streaming wars from the television, right? Like the golden age of television from like early 2010s to kind of like the last 15 years or so. People were like, okay, we don't have these big budgets and technology like the volume sets that Disney uses for Star Wars and stuff, which Joseph Kaczynski did very early on with Oblivion, way back whenever he developed that great sci-fi thriller. So it's again, I think there's always going to be that balance, and I think just a little bit of overreach, right? The streaming wars went a little too far, so now that's contracting back. And I think with AI, that's happening too. So the MIT released a report last week or in July that was widely reported the last couple of weeks that 95% of most businesses are seeing generative AI pilots as failures. And I think what we try to preach from that is it's because again, the people who are making the millions are the ones selling the pickaxes in a gold rush. So they're also building that up. Like you could say, I think with the diffusion models, we can get to that just now, but like they're kind of over promising and under delivering right now. Like it's about 80% there, which is great. Doesn't mean you can't do a lot of great things now, but it's not a turnkey solution. It's not a end all be all. It's a tool, and the tool's only gonna be good as the hand of the craftsman who's holding that tool, right? So, can you just touch base on that? What you're seeing from the diffusion models and that kind of retraction back from the early creatives with AI?
I mean, I think that what's very interesting right now, I work in different markets. So my main market is the US market. I'm talking about branded content right now, commercials, right? I think let's first make this division. Let's make this division between film and advertising. In film, you're seeing companies making deals, cutting deals with the companies that are doing the frontier models, cutting deals and training the data on their catalogs, right? All those things are happening, but those are moves that hope to be future proofing these companies. They're not things that are affecting the industry right now. The first thing I would say is AI has not touched the labor market on 2025. There's no difference being made by AI in terms of how we affected as filmmakers, right? It's really the actual impact on it has not arrived yet in any of the things that I'm going to be describing. So in terms of film, you see deals, as I said before, future proofing companies. In terms of advertising in the US, companies are very worried about reputational impact of working with AI, right? This is a very controversial technology among artists. Artists are very vocal. They have very good ways and they're very good at telling stories and communicating. And I think right now there's a very loud group of people who think this is unethical, and we can talk about the ethics of AI. I think it's very, very interesting, and I have my point of view. And then you're seeing other markets, international markets that are not as developed or sophisticated, not sophisticated, but mature as the US market, right? And it's the markets that are less litigious. I think the US culture for outsiders is surprisingly litigious in that,
Mm-hmm.
there's a ripe environment to sue anyone else. And then, there's a huge industry of suing for different reasons. In other countries, it's less so. Like it's not as prominent, right? So I'm talking about like Latin America, which is one of the places I work. And then Asia, I would say that the Gulf countries like work in Dubai as well. And I have a perspective on how that's working. In those other markets, more up and coming markets, I think companies are less worried about the reputational impact of working with AI. They're more experimental. They're more curious about it. And they're actually creating campaigns with AI as we speak. So there are commercials being made with the technology we have right now. And sometimes those commercials look great because they're in the hands of very professional people. They sometimes look like crap. And they're put together with the things that we have. The things that we have, and now we can pivot into what is the state, the real state of audiovisual creation with AI right now. It's very atomized, a myriad of different tools, good at different things. From where I'm standing, and I'm not an expert, I can see great technology that didn't have the time to be productized in the right way because it's chasing a use case, right?
Hmm.
So many times you have foundational models or frontier models, whoever you want, whatever you want to call them, that you can see they're very powerful, and the UX UI experience is not there yet, just because they don't know what is it for. So when a VO3 comes along, you have a prompt box and you have some pictures, and you can see that they're chasing after what the market is trying to do. And they're trying to do so many things, right? At the same time, they're trying to keep pumping investment money, showing products that get adopted by people. At the same time, they're relying on creators to create these demo videos that populate social media, which are they're nothing in it on its own, right? They don't have a real application or utility yet. But even in those environments, people are managing to just like use a patchwork of different tools and create products that could be branded content. Branded content is very conducive to this kind of technology because we don't need that strong of consistency, which is a problem for the models. We don't need to show this in a cinema, so we don't need that perfect resolution. It's mostly for social media. And then we have tools to fix the problems of the models and still get benefits from it, right? I personally think that for me, something interesting has been that it has lifted a pressure off my back sometimes when I'm on set and I don't quite get exactly what I want, or I'm worried that maybe if I cut this, let's say 16:9, like a wide angle shot, but then the client will want a vertical for social, a crop, that the resolution will be there or not. Like there's so many things that I now go like, okay, I could fix that with AI because I know the tools and I know how it would work. But I could not apply that to the US because sometimes we sign contracts saying we're not going to use AI, but I could for other markets. So my point is that the technology will evolve in the next years. And I think that we need this to settle a little bit. Ironically, we need the technology to not advance so much so quickly. So the companies have time to understand, okay, what are the use cases? What are the business models and how those tools could be applied in a professional pipeline? And that's when it's going to get, I think, into movies. And that's when it's going to get into other places. Everybody's touching it in pre-production, but the actual output of the tools is not there yet. If that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, and it's funny because we very much see the parallels with what's happening in the business world as well, in the traditional business world with AI. A lot of vibe coding and things you'll do in the pre-production, and or you're not going to get into production or day-to-day usage. It's something to help framework stuff, get an MVP, get a POC, and it's funny because you've echoed many of the same sort of things. As they're building these models so quickly, and then people they see that it's a gold rush, and so they're like, we got to build an app. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't know how it's going to do it, and so they're just skipping over the most important aspect of a startup. And I was just with the DFW Startup Week a couple weeks ago, talking to founders, and it's product market fit. That's what Y Combinator preaches. That's what everybody preaches. Like, get it in front of people and say, give us feedback. How can we improve this? Is this something they actually needed? And a lot of times what we say with AI, we're building the guardrails as it's going down the train's going down the tracks, right? Where they're not already there. And so this is what the ethics aspect of it. And some folks are going to end up with egg on their face at some point because they're going to be really, really embarrassed. And so I think that's why many of the US companies are risk adverse, because if, brand damage and things could happen. From a creative perspective, I don't really think that's a big deal. But when you're dealing with personal data or user data or B2B data, things could get really ugly really quickly. But it's funny because the parallels are there, even though it's two completely different worlds, right? So hopefully people know that the big thing is yeah, we're here now. You should get started now. Learn how to use these tools. It is making your life easier in some ways, right? You've said that hey, I know I can use AI tools to not make that shot perfect. It's not perfect on the day, but I can make it perfect from there. And if you know that, then you can upskill yourself and make sure that you're able to deliver. And at times when you wouldn't necessarily be able to. So there's things you can do now, but it's not a magic lamp. It's not going to answer all your questions and be everything for you.
No, no, at all. I was hearing this article about the impact of AI on productivity on the top Fortune 500 companies, and it's very little, right? And when you think about it, these tools are still so in their infancy. They're not specialized, right? So if you are a very big CEO, you have a secretary, And that secretary really does the job of an LLM exponentially better. So when you're challenged with using these tools, you kind of don't know where they fit. I think right this second, it's a kind of like a wild west. So the people more suited to use and take advantage of these tools are people who are entrepreneurial, they are resourceful, they are not tech adverse. They have like an imagination how to combine these tools for some tasks. You got to be an enthusiast in a way. And film is no different. Like if you want to use these tools, let's say you're a professional comp artist or a professional 3D modeler or texturer, there's little that this can do for you. Like your work is so specific and it's created within a very rigid structure of pipelines that it's going to be very hard to take advantage of these tools to make your life easier just because your work fits on a very specific process that has been set for you. So big productions are not using it, but you are seeing it in the softer areas, right? Pre-production, conceptualization, previs. There's things here that are already been taking advantage. These tools have been having an impact on those moments. For me, because I do so many things, I use them a lot and I use them a lot in different ways. But I'm kind of like I don't think I'm the example of everybody. Like I'm a very, I'm a nerd and I'm like, I love this. I love combining art and technology, and I really love the process. And I'm always trying to improve process and create new pipelines. It's kind of a thing that I have enjoyed throughout my career, and I applied all these different ideas and tools. And my style, most importantly, is mixed media. So mixed media is a very soft style. So I mix animation with live action with VFX. So I'm very, my style is ripe for that kind of technology is really making a difference. For some other people, it's I would say the learning curve is steeper because by the time you put something together, the technology has moved somewhere else. And I've seen so many people in my industry creating products, wrappers for different things, or putting things together to create character consistency. And then the next day, Yo3 or whoever comes up with a product that does that perfectly, they have lost the money. So people are a little bit wait and see with this thing, even though they're very surprised of the enormous potential that it has. And we all know this is going to be the future. We just don't know exactly how it's going to play out, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think most of the failures that are happening in the business world today, where, the MIT study that said 95% of generative AI rollouts have failed and or they're not seeing the money back, that's generally because that's becoming from the top down. And I equate that to, the entertainment industry where you have business people making decisions for artistic impression. And so that's one reason I love James Gunn. He's an auteur and like he's leading the studio now. And like I don't know why that doesn't happen more in Hollywood, but the bean counters are the ones making decisions and making decisions on cuts and stuff. When it's like, hey, just shut up and let the creatives do the work. I think that's happening in the business world too, where you have a corporate vice president goes to a corporate retreat, meets other VPs, or is on the golf course. Is like, yeah, we're using AI and all this other stuff, and they're thinking in quarters, right? Where the boots on the ground, the people doing the work every day, they're thinking in years and generations because that's the world they live in every single day. And much like with creatives, they're thinking on that one project only. They're not thinking all these other layers. And so I think if businesses flipped that on its head and like started with the bottom, like, hey, what problem can I help you solve? What the executive assistant, like you said, how can I make her life easier? Not how can I make the executive's life easier? Because I make her life easier, she's going to be better there to serve him or support him. And that I think that's the problem is like we think top down whenever we need to think bottom up when it comes to innovation.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that the disconnect between management and the boots on the ground, the people who are actually working with these technologies, is fundamental. That's why I think it's very important to educate artists on what are the tools, what do they mean, what are the ethical concerns that we have, and how are we planning to solve them. I think that I'm in touch. I'm very good friends with the folks at Asteria Group. So Asteria and Moon Valley are these two twin companies creating Marae, which is a frontier model for video creation. The difference between everybody else and these people is that they have created this model. They have trained the model on data that was licensed. So everybody in the data set has been paid for. And so it's one of the first ethical models out there that you can actually engage with, knowing that everyone that contributed to the creation of the image that you are putting out was part of the model because they wanted to be. And this is something that felt like a huge betrayal to artists everywhere, is that the fact that their data it's been scraped, sometimes against their will, from even their own portfolios to create the diffusion models that we use. this is not nothing. We haven't seen this before. It's a completely new ethical conversation. Some people will say, okay, yeah, but the data points are a drop in the bucket. They're not contributing fundamentally to the resulting image. And yet, morally, it's a very debatable subject matter. And I think that people are right to be upset. Now, when people come to me and say that and want to fight AI, I say, okay, that's a noble endeavor. Like, if you want to be an activist against AI, I think we need you. I think that we need more people who hate this and will set the boundaries and start having, like, and pull the conversation to pull the rope to the side of the conversation where we really need to be careful about these things, because I think there's a lot of folks and a lot of capital being pulling the rope in the other direction and being unrealistic about what is going to happen with the disruption that these tools create. Having said that, I think Murray is a good example of, okay, that's a North Star in terms of
Hmm.
where should we be going with this technology. And I'm hopeful that we can create models that are as good as VO3 without the need of unlicensed data. Then the next question is disruption and the implications of labor replacement. I'm really serious about this because, of course, if a societal change happens so fast, like, you don't give society a fighting chance to adapt. Like, that's not true that every change in technology has brought just abundance and happiness to everybody involved. Like, some people, I think it's a reshuffling of cards, and in that reshuffling of cards, you may maybe get a better hand, and your hand is
Hmm.
better. And most times, their hand is not going to be better because you just don't want to do it. Like, maybe what you want to do is to draw on paper and get commissions, and now there's a devaluation of the process of illustration because someone else is selling this digitally and at scale. So I would say we need to take that very seriously. To people who feel like they are in the disrupted end of the spectrum, I say, all right, if you're selling some very analog work, if you could aspire to be the vinyl record, and I think that's going to be increased in value. Like, the people who know traditional processes are
Hmm.
going to be fine. If you are a watercolor artist, and you are you're painting, commissions. If I'm talking about commercially here, but you can think about artistically, I think you're going to be fine because those skills are hard skills that you earn, and there's no replacement for the story of someone painting in watercolors and all that stuff. I think that if you're in the middle, if you're a digital artist, I think that's when you have the short end of the stick. And to those people, what I would say is either adapt and start using this to improve your craft, to move to do it at scale or to create opportunities for yourself, or lean into the meta story behind your work. And I think that's the one thing that AI cannot replace. I think that when we engage with a work of art, we engage with the actual piece that which is in front of us, right? We engage with a movie, we engage with a book, we engage with a painting. But as important as to see the final result of that piece of art is the story that comes behind it, right? So who did that and why did that? What were the struggles that led to that artist to create that piece of art? Is, to me and to people, as important as the final result. I think AI is disrupting the execution side of the artistic spectrum, right? Is creating art at scale, and sometimes it's indistinguishable from the art created by artists. But what I cannot do is to create the story behind it. So when we prompt something and get it out, I think we need to think about conceptually, okay, why are we doing it? And if we want that to be a meaningful thing that people engage with, the story behind it has to be as important as the final result. Like, there's no shortcuts for your life story. There's no shortcuts for your story as an artist. And for humans, the story of the artist is as important as the final piece, I think.
No, I mean, I think for artists in general, that trials and tribulations, the life path, like you said, you know, go from South America to Europe to New York to LA, that's framed who you are, right? And in the business world, having the experience that you have, you know, all the jobs you go through shapes you very much in the same way. And I think that's great. I think that's very accurate. And I think what I see happening more and more in the future is people are going to yearn for that personal touch, right? We saw this during the rise of COVID, that, you know, people were starting businesses in their garage, you know, artisans, like artisans creating leather goods, or, you know, bladesmiths or something like that to start. I think that's going to happen more and more and more, and you're going to have these more boutique type scenarios where people are like, hey, I want some cool, you know, art on demand, where it's you're working with a cohort or something to build something really quickly, that's specific to you or your family and those things. And so I think there's going to be areas for it's going to increase in things, areas we never even thought possible. Like you said, it's going to be tough for some people to adapt. Hopefully the good news is that I think we're the cart's before the horse right now. I think we're going to see this leveling off and steadying until, like you said, we have a better understanding of what these tools are. And it's good to know that there are ethical people out there like the Moray models and things trying to do the things the right way. Because for folks that don't know, basically how OpenAI and Google and all of the other ones got to where they are is they just scrape the open internet. And so that you can go to ChatGPT and you say, summarize the Harry Potter saga for me, and it'll summarize it for you. It's not because they paid J.K. Rowling and their publisher to give them all the rights to that. It's just because it scraped it, and so now it knows it. And so they've done that with digital art as well. And so it just know that in the future we don't really know what those ethical concerns are and who should get paid and what it is. But it is, I think technology is a great equalizer, and we're going to have better ways to build these models in the future where everybody gets their part.
I hope so. And I think in the meantime, we need to engage with the models. I think even for people who are adverse to them because of the ethical concerns, what I recommend is engage with them, because you gotta be able, we need to shape this conversation from an artistic standpoint. It's interesting how to see the disconnect, because I'm in the, I'm friends with a lot of people in the industry, and I know the backstage stories. You can see there's a huge disconnect between the engineers and the artists working side to side to create these models. They don't know anything about cinema. They don't know anything about literature. And it's not a bad thing necessarily. I'm not just saying they don't know anything and they're come to disrupt our thing. Whatever. The point is, they need this. The feedback that artists are giving the engineers and the companies and the executives is really making an impact. Like, there is a conversation to be had about what are the ethical concerns, what are the use cases, what do we want disrupted, what do we not need disrupted, what are the business models for this. There's a huge conversation. As artists, the working artists need to be part of that conversation. And the only way to do that is to engage with the products and post online and have an understanding of how they work, what they do, the minimal boundaries of what you consider ethical or not. So we can be part of it. We can get our foot on the door on this thing and not leave corporations the whole power to shape it for us, because we've seen what happened in all the other industries, and it's not pretty. Like, it takes too long for people to react. Technology and disruption move way, way faster than society sometimes. You've seen this with the music industry, with Spotify, right? We've seen this with the cab drivers, with Uber. We've seen this over and over. Industries that thought that disruptors will not amount to anything, and then it was too late to pivot, and they were basically had no leverage to force a conversation. So I think it's very important for artists to actually not to learn from the past and those disrupted industries and say, all right, well, now it's our turn. Visual artists and filmmakers, I speak for them because I'm an illustrator and I'm a filmmaker. Okay, how can we be part of it and set our boundaries? I think to that extent, maybe in a clumsy way, the WGA strikes were interesting. They were not wrong in the boundaries that they set. The boundaries that were set on the WGA, even when they didn't amount to better wages for writers, I don't think that went well for many reasons. It's not the fault of the folks at the WGA. This is the Writers Guild strikes that happened last year. Well, but they set the tone, right? Now corporations go, okay, we're not going to rewrite your screenplays. We're not going to present. Okay, there now we have an etiquette, how to behave. And if you cross that line, you get a reputational hit, right? Societally. Maybe it's not a legal thing, but if you cross that line, you know who's going to be against it. And maybe very powerful voices will be against it because they had a conversation about it, right? So I think that's important. I don't think that's to be discounted.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think, again, the democratization of technology is super important. And it's not just for the technologists. And like you said, if the technology people are, and I'm a technologist all my life, do have a creative side, and I love. I was going to be an engineer, so like I have that aspect of me. But like at the same time, empathy isn't exactly the strongest suit of most technologists. It just isn't. And so, but meanwhile, the artists, it's overwhelmingly a strong suit for most artists, right? So I think it's that yin and yang. It works great together. And whenever you see those things fused together, I think you will see more successes. And if you're not a part of the conversation, then all the people are just going to run away and do what they want with things. And so I think that's like like you said, stand up for what's right, do the right thing, loud, be vocal, but use these tools so you can understand these tools. And not only that, we haven't talked about the geopolitical aspect of it, because it's not just the U.S. and in the West, there's China, the big looming, China. If we don't foot the bill and get out, cheaper entertainment and things, China will, and other countries will try to step in and fill that void too. And they don't care about your rights or artistic impressions or doing the right thing. So I think this is going to take a village. I say we're creating a cult of AI because I think AI is going to change. It's going to cure cancer at some point or help cure cancer, and it's going to do great things. There are going to be bad things along the way, and the only way we can combat that is with good people standing up and doing the right thing and being the voice for the people, the voiceless, right? So I think that's why we're having this conversation.
It's good to have it. And I'm glad to be here to have that conversation, because I think we need to get the word out and we need to make this bridge. Is what I love about your podcast is like you're creating a bridge between our community and yours. And I think that's very important. We need more of those connections.
Yeah, and so I could probably talk to you forever, but I think we can start winding things down. And I think we can kind of wrap this up with, like, what would your advice be for creatives? Spend a couple minutes just talking about creatives and what they can do to get involved, to not be afraid, but to go forth into the unknown, right? To kind of see help guide the direction of what's going to happen with these technologies and the creative industries.
First, I would say play with the tools, even if you hate them. Go ahead and try them and see what they're capable of doing. Understand that they're in their infancy, that this is only going to get better, especially this. I think the limits of diffusion models, the kind of technology that affects our industry, is, I think, way more mature and way a much better position to disrupt the our industry than it is LLMs for coding. There's a big conversation about, okay, how this is actually going to affect coding, how this is actually going to affect enterprise. I'm not an expert in that conversation. What I can tell you is, like, the technology that we have right now, productized in the right way, could be very disruptive. So engage with it, know that it's coming, know that it's going to be a part of it. Try to force this technology to become a tool. This technology is not necessarily a tool on its own. It's a different kind of beast, right? It's not a plugin on After Effects. It's more than that. And so to that point, you need to be trying to force this back into the toolbox and say, okay, this is how I'm going to use it to augment my work, as opposed to let it replace my work. I would say that. I would say take a stand, and you can have like an understanding of it, and then a political opinion of it. And it doesn't have to be black and white. You can think of AI as something that could be very powerful and potentially very exciting, and at the same time, you could be against people scraping the internet to steal other people's art for their bottom lines. It's fine to have nuance in this conversation. It's much needed to have nuance in this conversation. Black and white positions tend to be great online for engagement, not that great for moving this conversation forward and helping people adopt the technology or prepare for it. And then finally, I would say lean into your personal story. If you're an artist and you're creating art for the art's sake, I think don't be worried, because art has been disrupted many times and it's not about execution. A work of art has nothing to do with execution. South Park is great not because it's done in a very perfect way, right? It's great because it's funny, because it was created by these two guys that are extremely funny, and because it talks about something that is important to all of us. So understanding that this technology comes to deliver perfect execution is sometimes a recipe for art, is not for money, right? If you're an artist that are selling their work, the ability to create work at scale, it will put downward pressure on your wages. Of course, there's no doubt about it. If you have something that creates something very cheaply, then suddenly what you're doing is subjected to the same market forces. For that, I would say try to adapt it, try to adopt it, try to use it and leverage your work. And then I think engage, if you're a content creator, engage with people and audiences and try to create a micro audience that could support you in your life journey, as opposed to just that specific work that you put out, right? Because in that case, it doesn't matter what things are created with. People are there showing up for your work and hopefully connecting with your art and engaging in a dialogue.
No, I think those are all great insights and guidance as well. And again, I think the human touch is going to be more needed than ever. And the beauty of being an artist is generally artists tend to love what they do. Most people who go to a 9 to 5 don't love what they do. And if you love what you do, are you really working? I started my company 2 years ago, and I tell people all the time, it's more stressful than I've ever been in my entire life, but I love it because it's my stress, right? It's my stress. It's nobody else's stress. It is what I make it, and I put good things out there, hope good things come back. And I think the beauty is the artistic industries have kind of a leg up on the business industry. So you're already starting on second base. You're already doing something you love, right? You just round third and come home. And it is one of these things, I think, use these tools, whether you like them or not, and whether you're in the industry or not. If you're a listener who's just part of the other business industry and you're afraid of AI, use these tools, because that's, if you understand them, you understand at the end of the day, it's just math. And how we come up with those things is it's not genius, right? But it's how people are going to use it that's genius, I think, is going to be what's the really groundbreaking things. And it's going to revolutionize. It's coming for us whether we like it or not. So get ahead of the curve, understand these sort of things, and ask these tools to help you learn how to better use those tools too. That's, again, one of the unique aspects of using these things. So thank you so much again, Nico, for joining us. As we wrap up here, why don't you just have a call to action for folks, tell them about your website, your podcast, or anything else you'd like to tell us about?
Sure, you can find me with my name, Nico Casavecchia, on all my socials. And then also I have a podcast called You're Not Gonna Make It that I co-host with my friend Helen. And we talk about all these things, but also mostly about entertainment and film. So you can watch us online on YouTube and everybody. We can leave a link at the description, I guess, and people can just go for it and connect.
So everything we've talked about in this episode, one of the great things about this, about our podcast, is we also release a newsletter. So this episode will be out this Friday. We'll release a newsletter on LinkedIn on Monday that will have all the links to stuff we talked about, including the movies I dropped and all those things, and the historical aspects of you. I use AI to say, hey, summarize this for me and give me some resources. And I provide those resources. Sometimes we have 20 or 30 resources. So just hit up linktree.com/digitalmeld. You'll get access to our newsletters at the top of that, and then all the other links in that newsletter. And the show notes will have all the links to Nico, his website, LinkedIn, the podcast, which is fantastic. I love the podcasts that talk about Hollywood and in another world. I would have wish I was bold enough to head out west and try that out, because
Never too
I'm
late.
a movie buff. Yeah, that's the beauty of the tools of this, right? I'll leave it to the experts, and then just watch the Criterion Closet on YouTube every week whenever the new episodes come out. So, but thanks again, Nico, for joining us. If any passing words of wisdom you'd like to say to folks out there?
No, just stay safe and survive. Survive until we don't want to put it a year anymore. So just survive.
Yep. Again,
we used to say survive until 2025, but that's long gone. So now just stay alive.
Yeah, and again, find folks that are like-minded, that can help you with these tools. Look up meetup.com. There's AI-related things here in Houston and all across Texas. I'm sure there's even more in LA. Just get involved and be active and be proactive, right? Spiral out, keep going, and just keep striving for greater and greater. I think we're going to be okay, because there's folks like Nico out there fighting the good fight, and so we'll keep chugging away.
Amen.
All right, until next week, we'll look forward to chatting to you soon. Bye-bye. We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.